Hello friends, I'm Rocky Outcrop. This is Bitcoin Technical Analysis. I really do appreciate you joining me for it. And just as I start off the show here, I just want to say, hey, look, we're at $11,015 at the moment, where we can pick up more or less where we left off yesterday. We're talking about this area as being a key inflection point in the market in around 10,700, say, and then towards the top side, we're also looking at that 11,400 as being the top side area. So we'll dive into all that in a bit more detail in just a sec. But before we do, Ekram Karatas, thank you so much for becoming the very first member of the channel. That is awesome. Thank you so much. You're a wonderful person. So great. That's excellent. If anybody else wants to hit that join button and become a member of the channel, then you'll also get a shout out just like that. Great. So thank you so much. And I'll be doing it in all the videos today. Great. I'll just zoom on in a bit then and take a look at where we've come from recently. We spoke about the potential for head and shoulders here in the stochastics, and we spoke about the potential for a head and shoulders here on the price action as well in yesterday's video. And just tuning back in with that, well, we can see that it failed in a number of ways. The first off, we would have looked towards this area here at say 11,000 and well, just more or less where we are now, really, and said, if we consider that to be the right hand shoulder, movements up above that are a failure of the pattern, and where you could expect the prices to go thereafter, of course, could be up as high as the head there, or just up to previous targets that we've had in mind. And that's what we saw the prices ultimately doing, having gone up as high as, what's that in there, at 11,348. Before coming back down towards the top, the lower side here, and then offering up the same sort of questions really as before. We're going to have to look at this and say, are we going to have a degree of bearish price action, or will we have a degree of positive price action? And what will we look out for in the meantime? Such as, will there be a head and shoulders happening here, with simply this being the head and a shoulder coming in and around that zone? Let me get the brush tool up here and kind of ask a question about this and say, will this operate as a head and shoulders for us? And I see the prices then again ask questions at this neckline area in around about 10,800 to 10,700. Or will we see the prices go back up above this zone, really, at that 11,200 area and challenge towards the top side again? Yesterday's video, what we talked about was how there was the bearish divergence here. If you look on the RSI and the stochastics and the DMI between this high and the previous one on the 4-hour time frames, that could have been your shoulder, your head, and then another shoulder in here, with the prices having experienced a degree of cool down after the bearish divergence. But that didn't actually end up happening. Instead, the prices came on up higher and put in another high, which is again lower than the other one. So now we can take out a wee sort of trend line type thing to put this into context here just on the price action at the minute, and say, are we seeing this divergence here signaling to us that we've maybe got a top coming in at this particular price action, whether it ends up ultimately being just a higher low in terms of an upward movement and all the rest of it. If we go back up towards the daily time frame, we've come up here and it's fairly extended looking. Of course, we could keep on going towards the top side and have a real sort of run up the way like we saw back in April and all that, these times back here last year, where we just kind of went up, did have a bit of pullback, sure, but then went on up and on up again. So, I wonder, in around this 10,000, in around this 11,000 area, where do we see it here? Yeah, just where we are just now. Obviously, the price line shows me, yes, that there's clearly a degree of this being an area of past price action, support and resistance, and profit taking, an inflection zone in the market previously, as you can see, it kind of going down to where we had the fuzzy line at drawn in as well before. Where does that fuzzy line at show up at? If I go zooming in, it's underneath the yellow one. Yeah, so I'm just going to move this up to around about here so we can see, between the two sort of zones, if we did actually see the prices drop back down again. So that's kind of where I would maybe be looking to, would be towards that 10,500 area if we see the prices dropping down here. And finding that this actually acts as resistance in and around this zone here for us. But if we push on past it, then we'll be going up past the head of any potential head and shoulders, and perhaps then moving towards the top side thereafter. And we've got this target drawn in before to give us something to look to at 11,500. So while the price targets are kind of more or less the same as what they were before, they're maybe slightly less sort of grandiose, that we are looking in this zone here as to how the price action will all evolve over the next next wee while. And if we do see the prices come down, then I suppose the first sort of area to look to be taking profits at there, or the fake out zone. Like we like to talk about areas, just this area here could be, where you'd have to have a little bit of caution between the 10,000, actually I've got that a bit high, between the 10,800 and 10,700 area, where we see the top side of that previous parallel channel coming in at, would be where you'd want to be careful, just with your trading and whatnot in and around those zones, if there's going to be some sort of hesitation in the market or a turnaround, even just to kind of keep an eye out for all that sort of stuff in there. So that would be what I'm looking at, really. And I think I'll probably not go and spend too long here, but I am going to here in a second. I'm not going to spend too long going through the different time frames, because that's really more or less what I'm looking at the moment, because we've had this rise up and we're yet to kind of check in with our onward destination. Yet are we going to be then taking the bus off up the mountains to go to the ski resort, having flown all the way to here, or are we going to, I don't know. That's a real bad analogy. That one, that was a failure. Sorry, I'm letting the side down here. I'm letting Ekram down here, having come up with such a crap analogy there. I was just trying to say, where are we going? Are we going to the seaside, or are we going to the another crap analogy? You choose. Crap analogies for everybody. Right, great. Yeah, but I did want to look at the other time frame. So this is the 24-hour one, and we've looked there already. So if I just go down to the 1-hour time frame and just try and check in with this and see, well, that bearish divergence we were talking about on the 4-hour time frame showed up here again as well. And obviously, and are we going to then maybe get a fourth taste of it, on the way down? Or will that actually be it? Yeah, it really does kind of come down to those questions that we've already asked. We're looking at that 11,250 area. If we get past that, the next profit taking target's that 11,500 area. Going towards the downside, you're looking at the sort of the 11,000-ish area where we're at the minute, and then down towards that 10,800 area and 10,700. If we see the prices moving on down, we could be going to 10,500. And yes, there are plenty of other targets to be looking at all around this. Plenty of other ones. We're coming in for the very end of the month today here, so there's a few things I suppose that we should really talk about, since we have got the coming up at the end of the month here. This is the monthly chart at the moment. You can see the wee drawings that we were messing around with there on there. If the prices did drop down to any of these targets that we're talking about, then they'd be clearly still putting in a high compared to all the previous months. Even if it went all the way down to 9,500, it would still be a high compared to the previous month. So that's maybe something to bear in mind, not necessarily for today, Well, of course, you can get big pullbacks at the end of months. Of course you can. This could be, where we could then maybe start thinking, well, if we're going to have a positive trend here, then we'd want to be putting in a higher low. And what would a higher low constitute here on the monthly time frame? Well, a higher low would come in anywhere down as far as 6,500. Okay, so if you're looking down towards targets like 9,500, a whole 30% up from the 6,500 one, then you're not being completely outlandish in what you're talking about in terms of where the prices could go over the period of the next month thereafter, if we were to see things pull down the way. Of course, looking back, there are times when we've had big rises up, like this is what I was talking about in terms of April and up May, maybe I should have said, last year. You can see this, and it could just, we could just get in another month here and just go wee up towards, the previous targets up there at 14,000, like we did here in January 2018. Maybe, that can happen. That can happen. And this can happen, so that's kind of the broad term picture. If we did go down towards the downside, then the downward sloping weekly resistance line that we had on here, this white one, is down there at 9,450. If we come down to the 9,500 area, then that's nothing in terms of additional movement or whatever. But that's where I'd be looking to, I suppose, if we saw a pullback down the way. If indeed we see things go towards the top side, then I suppose it is fair to look towards previous targets. Just for instance, here at where these wicks came up to 11,700, or indeed even up as high as the 14,000 area where we were at before. But there'd be plenty of action along the way before then, as we've had here over the last wee while. So we did get this period of sideways. Now, people were talking about how we went sideways for months and months, and this is the monthly time frame or the weekly time frame here, and you can see that while we did go sideways, kind of, and this is encapsulated with this symmetrical triangle since April. Then we've broken out of that, and we've had the full measured move off the back of it as well already. Just bearing this in mind here. right? And there are other things pointing towards the downside as well, such as this gap on the charts down there, on the CMEs down there at 9,830. But I suppose this is where we can finish up the episode and just check in with the gaps that we had on the chart here as well, and maybe take a quick look at GBTC as well. And that'll do for today's episode then. Going from the weekly, let's go back down towards the daily time frame, because of course that gap down the way in this area here at the 9,800 area is visible on the weekly time frame, where we had that weekly support of that symmetrical triangle or resistance even. We spoke about the smaller time frame ones, like the 1 hour chart and the gaps that you see on there in the recent past. And you'll see that I drew this one in yesterday's episode, and we're talking about, do these things ever get filled and whatnot, and is there any point in doing them? Well, it's not a crystal ball for you, but you can see that just there earlier on today at 1 p.m. universal time that that happened. It got filled, okay, just in there 11,050 on the CME chart. So that can happen. What happened on the spot prices at 1 p.m.? Let's just go over to spot prices and look to 1 p.m. Well, we had this big old wick here, and where did we come down to on that one? Down to the 10,800 level, and then we found our feet and went towards the top side. So, really, we've really actually, yesterday's episode and today's episode, but yesterday's episode really did encapsulate everything that you would have needed to have known there for the prices moving. But that's not just all there's been, there's been other ones. So will we see, for instance, this already got filled. Will we see this gap that I marked in, presumably, on the 1 hour chart get filled? Yes, we will. And how will we see it operate? Well, we'll saw it getting filled in, and then another gap here appearing. So this is maybe I just moved it by accident. That maybe would explain it better. Right, cool. So will we see this gap anyway towards the top side being filled in at 11,460? If we do, then the question kind of zooms in on this area up here, 11,700, if we were to go in and fill this gap that we've had on the charts for a very, very, very long time. Not even going to bother going all the way back there, but this is a gap that's visible in the daily time frame, and at some point this will get filled. Now, will that happen soon? We were a little bit kind of question marking this, asking a few questions about it with the way that this rose up here, looking at the bearish divergence and whatnot, and we had a pullback down the way and filled in this gap here on the 1 hour time frame. So maybe we could go on and do those two next, perhaps. If not, then there are other gaps, like we spoke about, like this big old effort down here, and we've got one at 7,500, and we've got one at blah blah. So there's various places to look to as well, but those that'll be what I'll be looking to on the CME charts, checking in with things like divergence and whatnot as you're in and around those areas to see how it would handle them. And I wanted to finish up this one on the GBTC. So thank you so much for tuning in. Really do appreciate it, as ever. Like I was saying, now, here's a big old gap right above us. This is the hourly chart you can see here. So the GBTC charts, so you can see this looking back, the way the wicks all overline each other and everything else, that there's just the one sort of gap here in terms of the hourly chart until we go back to the other day there from the last 24 hours or so. That we could be aware of. I suppose we'll put a wee marker in there just so we know and we can come across it again. Then between these two zones here, there's a gap that's already the fuzzy lines now. I believe that I probably put them in before, but then they've gapped just precisely to them. I can't actually remember. If any subscribers remember when I drew these GBTC things, I might have done it on that Ethereum video the other day. Can't really remember. Anyway, that clearly marks that gap off there. We can see that quite clearly in there at that zone. So, the pricing here in the GBTC chart is quite different to the other charts, but this is looking down to 11, from 11 down to 10.6. If the current prices are 11.9, nearly 12, and the spot prices are 10.9, then maybe somewhere around 10.6 is the equivalent of that 9,600, 500 area, just to be aware of. So there's these gaps here as well. Cool. Okay, everything's wrapped up there. Done that. Really enjoyed it. So if you want to hit that button and join up with Ekram there, then you'd be a hero. Of course, you'll get a shout out in all the videos. But if you don't want to do that, that's totally understandable. I would really just appreciate it if you show support to the channel by hitting the subscribe button. That would be awesome. So anyway, cool. Catch you next time. I've been Rocky Outcrop, youtube.com/Rocky Outcrop. Share it with your friends. This is the best place for technical analysis that you could have ever dreamed of. Yeah, cool. Okay, we'll go with that. See you next time.